Friends are someone who will come alongside you and they'll give you bad news with grace
Mhm.
and they'll give you good news with joy, but they're not going to withhold the news from you. And sometimes the news sounded like, "Hey, Jim, you're being an idiot." And I have a friend that has, when I got saved, I was 28 years old. And now at going on 66 next week, we're still walking alongside one another. And I
Amen.
can
That's
tell you
awesome.
that is something that does not come naturally in America or in American business or even, I mean, you can be a teammate, but it's not something where you are really vulnerable with another guy. So,
Amen.
Welcome to the Valiant Forge Podcast, where we help men overcome life's battles, show up better in the world, and become a valiant warrior for God. This is a place where we share practical strategies that will equip you on life's journey to help you become the man God has called you to be. Are you ready to overcome your doubt and fulfill your purpose just like Gideon? If so, let's go.
Welcome to the Valiant Forge Podcast, where valiant warriors come to be sharpened. I'm Mark Osborne. I'm the host of the podcast. Today, I'm going to be sharing a conversation I had with Jim Tracy. Jim is a former business owner. He is a public speaker. He is an author. He's a great man. He's also a grandfather of 16 grandchildren. It kind of blows my mind. I have three grandchildren, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. But he's also the Grampian, which you see on my shirt here. I That's not my moniker, that's his, and we'll hear in the episode how he got that moniker. But I think it's very cool. I like cool granddads. I feel like I'm one of the cool granddads myself, and he's a cool granddad. So this is a great conversation. We talk a lot about building men and lifting each other up and building a culture and a lot of different things. Speaking of building men, he has a book coming out called Building Men, which today you can pre-order the book. I'm going to have that link in the episode. And again, if you like the podcast, please subscribe. If you like the podcast, whatever channel you're listening to it on, subscribe. And I don't know this for sure. I just have what people have told me. And this isn't about me getting numbers. This is about me trying to reach more men. If you go on Apple Podcasts and subscribe and leave a review, I don't even know if I have any reviews because I don't even know how to look that up. But if you go and leave a review, then Apple will start promoting it to more people. And again, this isn't about me getting more people to listen to the podcast. It's about reaching more men. That's my mission here, is to reach more men. This episode, you're going to get a lot of value out of this. You're going to hear a lot that will help sharpen and encourage you to be a better man. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Jim Tracy. How are you? Welcome to the podcast.
well, Mark, thanks for having me. What a joy it is to be here. Thank you for asking.
So, do I call you Jim or do I call you Grampian?
Probably depends on who you are. But my grandchildren kind of they stuck that moniker on me, and so they feel free to use and abuse it. So yeah, if they want something, it usually comes out Grampian.
Why don't you tell me how that name came about?
We were playing a card game at a lake house with my grandson Wes, and a card is kind of a contact sport around our place, and Wes got beat, and he said, "You're not Grandpa anymore," and I was like, "What?" And he said, "And you're not champion either." And then he kind of got that Wesley smirk that he's famous for, and he said, "Oh, you're the Grampian," and that stuck, and so I love the moniker, and it has served me well.
So, how many years ago was that?
Oh wow, I think that was probably back in I don't know, maybe 2013. So
Wow.
long time ago.
I heard you on the Cool Granddads podcast. I think that's the name of it.
Uh-huh.
And I love that because you were a grandfather at a young age, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
I also was first a grandfather in my early 40s, and
Same here.
I didn't want to be called a grandpa, so I told them to call me Pop Pop,
Uh-huh.
and that seems to have stuck.
Yeah.
So whenever my grandkids come home or they come see me, Pop Pop, Pop Pop, and it's everybody, even people that aren't my grandchildren, will call me Pop Pop once in a while. So,
That's a wonderful legacy that you're leaving because society has told us for a long time that here's what you should do and here's the order it should happen. And it really is not focused on anything that is biblical or scriptural at all.
right.
How long have you been married?
39 years this coming June.
39 years. All right, congratulations.
Thank
We
you.
just hit 45, so
Wow.
us
Awesome.
grandpas got to stick together.
That's awesome. Yeah, I also related to a story that you told on that podcast where you did was it a Tough Mudder or something like that?
Yeah, we did
Spartan race.
a Spartan type race. Yeah, got another one coming up on July 12th.
Oh, wow. So I
Yeah.
ran a marathon in 2018. So I have this backstory up into my mid 40s. I was very sedentary, ate highly processed food, got
Hmm.
overweight, and then God got a hold of me and I started changing my diet and changing my whole lifestyle around where I actually took it to a wrong place, but that's another story for another day. So I got
Yeah.
into fitness and I had this goal to run a marathon. And it took me about 4 years to get there, but
Mm.
the day that I ran the marathon, it was 96 degrees out. They actually shut down the course. They were trying to shut down the course. After
Oh
four
my
hours,
goodness.
they shut off the clock because people were like starting to pass out and they were
Mm.
encouraging people to stop. But I kept going.
All right.
At the finish line, probably a quarter of a mile away from the finish line, my two grandkids, one was 7 and one was 3 at the time. They crossed the finish line with me.
All
My wife has
right.
a video of that happening. So
Wow. Perseverance, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, lots
And
of lessons.
my oldest granddaughter is 13 now, and she was just talking about that the other day. She's like, "Oh, I'll never forget that moment." Like it's
That's a
awesome.
gift. That's a gift you gave her, man. What kind of nut job runs a marathon at 96 degrees and finishes? Way to go.
Yeah, well, there's another story behind there because my daughter, I was ready to quit at the 18-mile mark. I called my wife. I'm like, I think you have to come and pick me up. My daughter grabs the phone and she's like, I've been listening to you for 3 years, trying to inspire people, telling people you're going to do this. I know you have this in you. Walk it off for a little bit and then try to run it. If you can't do it in the next mile, we'll come pick you up. But I know you can do this. That was enough to push me forward.
Right on.
Yeah.
Way to go.
So enough about me. Let's hear something about you.
Well,
Tell the
I got to
audience who
tell
you
you,
are.
your story is inspiring. Mine is just, my terrain races. I broke a leg pretty bad when I was skiing and crushed a tibial plateau. And the doc, I got to the emergency room and I had it all figured out. I said, control guy, right? So I said, okay, here's what you're gonna do. And he said, no. He says, if we don't operate in the next hour, we're gonna take your leg. And I was like,
Wow.
oh. Wow, well there's that. So I crushed a tibial plateau and I had compartment syndrome, and so I was 90 days non-weight bearing. They said, hey, you're never, I woke up, saw my toes. It was a beautiful thing. I cried like a baby. It's the only memory I have of that day. But then uh, they kind of threw the gauntlet down. They said, you're never going to run again. And I was like, yay. I was never a runner anyway. Thank you. And then they said, you're probably never going to walk right. And so I figured out, hey, I could walk right. And so we started walking a lot. And then after that, that's when we decided, hey, I might not be able to run a marathon because that's too much pounding on somebody else's knee, but
Right.
but I can do a 5K Spartan type race, and so that's what we started doing. And now I've got 7 grandkids on July 2nd or July 12th that are going to join me in a
Oh,
in
wow.
mud race here in Boise. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
So, do you think your faith in God helped you get through that little trial with your leg?
Oh my gosh. I don't it's difficult to describe if you go from being pretty active to not being able to, like you can't touch your toe to the ground. You can't even stumble. And so you go from, hey, I can climb a tower, which was my business, to you're in a walker. And it's very humbling. And then people who used to rely on you, you're now on reliant on them to get to the restroom and help you get to bed and bring you food. And it
Yeah.
was it was very, very humbling. However, one of the things that you realize when you go through something like that is that God designed a nuclear family to come alongside one another.
Hmm.
And if that's not the role, I mean, that's supposed to be the dad, father, protector uh,
Provider.
type role. But you know what? We're also supposed to be humble enough where we can accept help. And so
Amen.
there were a lot of lessons in that. And self-sufficiency is a problem in America today when we need, a lot of people talk about self-esteem. I think we need a little more Christ esteem, but
Amen. Amen.
that's, yeah, another part of it.
Yeah, so like me being in the fitness, starting in the fitness, I got really into self-development, which is kind of what led me to this podcast. But I
Hmm.
hate the term
Yeah,
self-development. Like what I'm trying to promote here is that we don't have to do this on our own. We have
yeah,
Christ helping us through it. And of course, that comes with this is about iron sharpening iron. We have
there
other
you go.
brothers to help us through. Like my purpose for starting this was for the longest time, those 40 years before God got a hold of me.
Hmm.
I got this. I can do this on my own. I can make it through. I was doing terrible. I was very unsuccessful at it until I started relying on other brothers and actually like getting connected with my wife and realizing that my wife is a helpmate and she leads
Yeah,
me in the right direction. So that's kind of how I don't like the term self development. I'm praying for God to
yeah.
give me a new phrase for I like the whole concept of bettering yourself, but not
Yeah,
for yourself, for other
yeah.
people. So,
Yeah, God left us two real commandments. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And
right.
then, if you get that right, and you won't, but if you do get it right, then you're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. And our closest neighbor is the one we married. And I mean, there are so many people who can come around. I'm reminded of a fellow. If I think about a friend, when you go into the book that I wrote, you're going to find there's one there called friendship. And friends are someone who will come alongside you and they'll give you bad news with grace
Hmm.
and they'll give you good news with joy, but they're not going to withhold the news from you. And sometimes the news sounded like, "Hey, Jim, you're being an idiot." And I have a friend that has, when I got saved, I was 28 years old. And now at going on 66 next week, we're still walking alongside one another. And I
Amen.
can
That's
tell you
awesome.
that is something that does not come naturally in America or in American business or even, I mean, you can be a teammate, but it's not something where you are really vulnerable with another guy. So
Amen.
yeah. Applaud you for what you're doing.
So, being in business and being a Christian,
Hmm.
is your integrity sometimes threatened? Are you're no longer in business? You recently sold your business, correct?
Hmm.
Were
Yeah.
there times where you felt like you may have to cheat a little bit to get further along in business? Did you get tempted? I guess is a
Yeah, there's always temptations out there. One of the benefits that I had is that I founded a business with my son, and the business that we founded was based. The name of the company was Legacy, and what we were focused on is the legacy that we're going to leave behind us. And Ryan and I got to hold each other accountable. And there's certainly times where you're tempted to win at any cost,
yeah.
and especially when, however, if you advertise the fact that you're a Christian, I put it this way: if you walk into a room and there's even in a business situation, if there is a woman there, I don't approach her. I save that for my wife. Part of the Probably part of the reason we're still married after 45 years is we have to honor and set apart her as forsaking all others. And so I think that even in American business today, there's a lot of pressure on people um, to have a non-gendered focus, but I have to. I'm a believer. I don't get that. I don't have that freedom, and it's not about them. It's about me. It's about my weakness and my frailty. So
Yeah, I love that. So you said you got saved when you were 28 years old.
yeah.
You want to tell us how that came about? What your life
Wow.
was like
You
before
know,
you got saved?
yeah. I so I had one goal in my mid to late 20s. I was going to make $100,000 a year before I turned 30. It's the
Wow.
only target I could see. It was an idol, quite frankly. And to in order for me to do that, it had to own me. And because I was in a construction type business, it was going to be difficult. And but I was going to get there. And we didn't have a lot, and my wife went to this church because they had free aerobics, and she grew up Presbyterian, and I was a Catholic-ish. I was a Catholic in name only, not like a rhino, like a chino, a Catholic in name only. And but anyway, she changed. She absolutely changed. And I used to tease her. I said, I can't even have a good fight with you anymore. You don't even fight back.
Mm.
And all the time she had a whole group of people that after she got saved that she had them praying for me. And then one night I went up into our bedroom and I said, like I've this end of the line, I've had it. I need to know, do you love Jesus more or me more? And she got pretty quiet and she said,
Wow.
well, Jim, you were always number two and you're still number two. The only thing that's changed was I was number one and now Jesus is number one. I just moved down. You didn't change position. And I thought, wow, that's true. I can't even have a good fight with her. But later that night, I was alone in our bedroom, and um, in my arrogance, I looked up to the heavens and I said, "Okay, God, I'm going to make a deal with you." And I think he probably shrugged and he said, "Oh boy, this one's going to be a project." And at some level, I submitted and surrendered to his will. And I kind of called him on it and said, hey, if you're going to do this to me and my family, you're going to have to prove it to me. And so it changed my life irrevocably, and it changed the life of my children and my grandchildren. And I'm stunned that God would take a sinner like me and bring him and adopt him and graft him into his family.
Amen. I think we all feel that way. I
Yeah.
felt that way. I mean, I was 14 when I got saved, but my dad had this like amazing miracle turnaround testimony when he got saved, where he was into drinking and alcohol and addicted to it all. One night he asked
Hmm.
Jesus into his heart and he was completely turned around, which that's what turned me around. And even though I was young when I got saved, I still feel like, God, why me? Why did you
Yeah.
choose me? It's amazing. I love to hear people's testimonies about how they came to their faith.
Yeah.
And now you're leaving this legacy. You have the name legacy. It's
Yeah.
awesome. Tell us. I know you're got a book coming out. Tell me something about the book. What's in the book? I love the
Okay.
giveaway.
Yeah. The name of the book is Building Men. It comes out on June 3rd, right before Father's Day, June 2nd, depending on which website you look at. But um, uh, w- uh, it's a collection of stories that all there are 22 chapters. Each chapter focuses on a character trait that a person who was masculine in nature gave to me. They invested in me. They took time that they didn't have. They took effort that they didn't need to expend on a kid, or sometimes some of the stories that these people are younger than I am, and the lessons that they gave me were all gifts. And talk about a teacher when I was in high school, and I actually grew up alongside of him in business as well. And his name is John Devine. He's great. I had a fellow by the name of Leroy Lundell who was a person of faith, and he looked at me one time and he said, "Now I'm going to send you out on the road selling stuff, and I want you to hand me your business card." And I handed him my business card, and he looked at it and he said, "Whose name is on that card?" And I was like, "Oh, Leroy, my name is on that card." And he's like, "No, Jim, my name is on that card." And so when you go out into the field, if I ever hear of you going out into a bar alone at night or cheating on your wife, I'm going to fire you. Do you understand? I was so terrified of him. I was like, "Yes, sir."
Wow.
And the gift, I mean, you probably couldn't do that anymore these days. I mean, but you could. But you could.
Yeah.
You're representing me in a private company, and people need to be held accountable. People are longing these days to be held accountable at a higher level. And that part of that is mentorship, which is really at the end of the day what the book is about. All these
Mhm.
character traits are learned by watching people. They're not learned in a tactile environment where I do what you do. A lot of times I just watch what somebody did, and that's what affected me. That's how you learn.
Yeah, I know one of the things that you talk about is creating culture
Hmm.
in a work environment.
Yeah.
Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. And if you think about it, there's a little book that I've got. It's called The Management Methods of Jesus. And it's an incredible little read. But if you look at what he did to create culture, he didn't lead from the back, he led from the front. He said, "Come and follow me." And then he said, "Do as I do." He said, "Be holy as I am holy." And when you set your standard high and you lead from the front, people, especially in this multi-generational environment, we have 6 generations in the workplace now, and all of them are longing to follow a leader who they can look up to. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the culture thing is we developed something called the blueprint for cultural revival, and it's it's not a lot different from the Bible, folks. But the principles that are there are sound and are proven and have been used centuries now to actually lead people. And so when we do that and we choose to do the right thing actively, what happens? Good stuff.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up blue collar. Still am blue collar. I work
Yeah.
in a machine shop right now, and a lot of the culture, it's I see it changing now, and I think a lot of that is due to people writing good books and good
Hmm.
mentors. But it used to always be, I'm the boss. You do this because I said so. There was no reason. It's just, I'm the boss. That's why. And there was
Yeah.
a lot of that. But I'm seeing it change now to where people are like, if you do this well, we're going to do well. You'll do better. I do better. That, to me,
Yeah.
that's true leadership.
Hmm.
Speaking of
And
leadership, go ahead.
intellectually and emotionally, we've changed. When my dad answered to my grandpa, he said, "Yes, sir." And he did exactly what he was told, when he was told, how he was told, why. Well, it didn't matter why. He just did it. And then my generation came along and my dad told me to do stuff. And I was like, well, I'm a little bit of a boomer hippie. And so there's gonna be some rebellion in there. And then I looked at my sons sometimes and I would say, "Hey, do this." And he would say, "Why?" And I'm like, and part of me is like, you don't get to ask me why, do you? I don't think that's part of the role here. Like, I'm the older, wiser sage. You need to just like get it done. And he would say, that's not a good reason.
Hmm.
And I thought, wow, you're right. It's not a good reason. Just because I said so is not a great reason to do so. I mean, unless there's a, life and limb at stake.
Yeah,
But if it's not, there's no teaching and there's no training and there's no mentoring involved in just do it because I said so.
right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
learned that a little late in life. Like when my kids were little, I was the same because I'm your dad. You have to
Yeah.
do this. And then when my grandkids started coming around, my granddaughters would be asking, "Why do I got to do this?" And I was explain it to them. Tell them why. Don't go outside without your coat on because you might get sick.
Yeah.
Not because I said so, because I don't want you to get sick, or I
And
don't want
and
you to
it's a win for both of you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just got to let them learn the lesson.
Yeah.
Like I do remember a time where I let my granddaughter, she's like, I don't want to wear my coat. I'm like, okay, but you're going to get cold, and then what are we going to do?
Yeah.
She's like,
My
okay,
oldest son has four boys that are right now they're 22, 21, 20 and 19.
wow,
And so there are four boys literally there's a 2 week time where they're four boys in 4 years. And he is a rancher and he would look at his boys and he said, well, that's probably gonna hurt. And they would go ahead and try it. And he said, no, that hurt, didn't it? And he said there wasn't many times when there wasn't somebody bruised, broken, or bleeding at our house. But you know what? He's actually ended up with four really, really responsible young men.
yeah.
So yeah.
So I see you're a very ambitious man.
Okay.
So if you had a young man who's like looking for, say, he's in his 20s, he's looking for direction. He
Mm.
doesn't know how to start, where to go, what to do next. What would you say to him?
Well, number one, find out what your why is. If you cannot determine what your why is, then you're never going to find what your where is. I mean, say I decide, I'm gonna go to Chicago. Okay. Um, am I gonna go via Denver or Dallas? Because unless I know why I'm going, I can't determine the route. I can't determine whether I'm gonna need rail, truck, or airplane.
Right,
I so if you can determine your why, especially at this information rich age, um, that's going to get you farther than anything. And then as you determine your why, you have to look at that why and say, who is driving the why? Because if you're doing it for you, or if you're doing it for your girlfriend or your wife or your kids or whatever, if you're doing it for somebody else, you probably ought to rethink it because it won't last.
right,
It will not last. And I, we adopted, so my wife Sarah and I adopted three children, and they were 10, 12, and 14. And when you come into a situation where you've got new people that you're bringing into your home and you're embracing as your own. And sometimes, they'll come out of a situation where they look at you and they're like, this dude is nuts. And when you get that response, your tendency is to go, I am not nuts. I'm and at the end of the day, um, my wife and I often had to look at one another, and we would take turns because one of them wants to kill him and the other one wants to hug him. And
right.
so, and then the next day it just flips the other direction.
Yeah,
And what we found is that we had to look at each other, remind each other that we were doing this for Jesus, not for us, not for the kids, not for the church, not for the reputation. We were doing this for Jesus, and that had to be enough. And
amen,
therein lies the reason why you should be making every decision. Because if you're not running it by the King of Kings, it's probably lacking some pretty good counseling.
amen. So I know you have like a foundation that you support, the Tower Foundation or something. Can you go into detail on that?
Yeah. So quite a few years ago, we had, and this is again in I think 2013, 2014, we found a employer in our industry had somebody get hurt pretty bad. wanted to help the family. And his lawyer said, hey, you can't help them because it's going to be look like an admission of guilt. And we pretty much thought that was hogwash. So he gathered we kind of did the first GoFundMe to help that person and his family needs. And then we looked at our industry, which was a high risk industry in construction of communication towers and the maintenance of communication facilities. And we said, hey, there's a lot of people who get hurt in our industry, and I wonder if other people are getting the message. So some fellow from California, some other folks, a great guy from Mississippi, and another lady from South Dakota, and I started the Tower Family Foundation, and we give money to people where they were involved in an industrial accident, and it just takes care of from the time the accident happens up until the system kicks in to take care of them. And we've just done a wonderful thing about taking care of the families. And we got some kickback on it. People are like, well, what if he was doing something wrong? What if that guy was, high on drugs or something? And we've been really sincere about it, saying, we don't know that that's his wife and children's fault. So we're gonna go take care of those families in that small gap of time when they're at their most vulnerable. And that's been a joy. That's been one of the most gratifying things I've ever done.
Awesome. Is this a fund that people can donate to?
Yeah, if you go to towerfamilyfoundation.com and or no, maybe it's towerfamilyfoundation.org, one of those two. Just look up Tower Family Foundation, and it's a 501c3, 97 cents on the dollar go to the families. So we have no employees, we have no chairs. We're run it pretty lean. And then there's another one too that I'm sure your audience would be interested in. It's called Telecommunications or Telcom Against Trafficking and Exploitation.
Yes.
And what we do is we train people on how to spot or recognize human trafficking, and then we get them a phone number that's a human trafficking hotline. And we've got folks all over the country that have been trained on this Tate initiative too. So, and it's a no-cost training.
That's awesome. I will have that in the show notes because I'm always encouraging men to do something outside of yourself and something like that, so it's something so meaningful. We have such a problem in the world today with sex trafficking and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. One of the problems I see in the world today with young men and even some older men my age, we tend to get stuck in our phones and just put everything else aside.
Yeah.
How do you think besides Jesus is the easy answer or the obvious answer.
Yeah.
How do we get away from that?
Wow, human connection. The big great question about and because I tell you, if you remember back in the 60s and 70s, we would come in, we would eat dinner, and then we would sit down in front of a television. And even before there was a remote, I was my dad's remote.
Same.
Change the channel when you twist it, and we would watch television until the 10 o'clock news was over if you're on Central Time, and then everybody would go to bed. I don't think this is a new problem. I think that as men, we have to be intentional at doing the job, doing the work that God intended for us to do. And when he tells you to lead, he doesn't mean lead at work. He means first lead your family. And I have an Android phone, and one of the features of it is that when you tip it face down and put it down on the table face down, it automatically has a do not disturb feature on it. And so I found myself doing it. I go up to my daughters a lot for dinner, and I won't take the phone with me. I'll just leave it somewhere where I'm, if we never used to have them, so it can always wait.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen. So there's a question I ask it. I sort of asked it earlier, but I'm going to go a little more in detail.
Okay.
At the end of every podcast, I ask every man this question. David, when he was in the cave of Adullam, running from Saul was chasing him. He wasn't paying attention to what was going on in the kingdom. The men in the kingdom were disgruntled, disheartened, didn't know what to do with their life. They came to David.
Yeah.
David said something to those men. We don't know for sure what he said. I recently was told that Psalms 34 is theoretically what David said to these men. But he said something to them, and these men ended up becoming his mighty men after he
Yeah.
became king.
Mhm.
You have that situation, you have a bunch of men, modern day men, coming to you, looking for direction and leadership. What would you say to them?
Wow. When I look at the group of people that's coming up under us, I have to point to examples. I would always hesitate to point to myself because I am a flawed creature, and if I point to the Bible, I'm going to find that is a perfect document. And I'm reminded there's a fellow by the name of Al, and Al told me about this place called Beit Shan in Israel. And if you stand up at the top of Beit Shan, it was a encampment. It was an enemy encampment, and it's where if you look off to the south, you're going to see where Saul was killed. And then they hauled him and his sons, and they parted them up, and they hung their bodies off the wall. But you look off to the north, and you see there's like this big basin, and then a river, and then there were guys on the other side of that river who purposed in their heart that they were not going to let their King Saul be defamed and defaced like that. So in the night, they went into this across the river at night up into this enemy encampment where they were, this is like a 99% failure mission. And they reclaimed the bodies of Saul and his sons, and then they took them off for a proper burial.
Yeah,
When God talks about them, he calls those men valiant.
yes.
I think that if we know the right thing to do and we do the right thing, then it's not sin. But if
Mhm.
we know the right thing to do and we do not do it, in the book of James it says,
It
then
is
that
sin.
is sin.
That's the sin of
So
omission.
one of the things that in our country today that is lacking is moral clarity. And I think we're headed back in that direction. I think there's some resurgence in the church, and I think they've seen some of the fraudulent leadership that has been evident in our country. Um, but that has also taken place in the church. Um, our masculinity has been tarnished and challenged, and we've gotten soft. And part of being a leader is here again, I'm like, Christ was out in front. He wasn't in behind. He wasn't saying, do it because I said so. He was saying, follow me. And
Right.
so if you want to do the right thing, my son Ryan has a saying. He says, all of the guys that we coached up underneath of us, we just taught them to do the right thing. And he once had somebody ask him, what if they don't know what the right thing is? He said, well, then we tell them to do the best right thing.
Hmm.
The reply then came, what if they don't know the best right thing? He said, well, we give them a phone and they can call us and we'll tell them what the best right thing is. And in many ways, if you don't know what to do and you don't ask the Bible, I mean, that's the basic instructions before leaving Earth.
Right.
And so we've got all we need. It's a matter of exercising that muscle memory.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exercising. You have to do it.
Yeah.
James says, draw near to God and he'll draw near to you. You have to
Exactly.
draw near first. Yeah.
Perfect.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
where can we find your book?
Anywhere you buy books, Barnes and Nobles. It's available for pre-sale right now at Barnes and Noble, and that's really cool because if you get a copy of it there, and if I get enough pre-sold copies, they're going to stock it in all 700 stores, which is
Awesome.
we're well on our way to that. But it's good to have a. It's not a Christian book. It's not a business book. It is a business book written from a Christian worldview. And
Awesome.
so hopefully we can do a little crossover there. So
Okay.
building men, and it's called Character Lessons from Influencers.
Awesome. And you have that you have the link on your website or anything like that?
Yeah, it'll be on my website. Yep,
Okay.
thejimtracy.com.
And I know you have a podcast. You want to promote your podcast?
Yeah, I'd love to have you come on my podcast sometime. It's called The Grampian, Grandpa Chats with Champions. And
Awesome.
we look for champions for every walk of life.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure having you, Jim.
Oh, it's my pleasure too, Mark. Thank you so much for asking me to come on. And God bless you, your show, and your audience.
Thank you very much.